Well, I guess I would ask whether or not Jeffrey is still on the line, because I know that Marcelo had a question.
Jeff is not.
Is he's not?
He went away.
Okay, let's open it up then.
Sorry, can I say something?
Yes.
We need to open to the world the discussion, not only for your country, because in the country, your country is very important because all people follow the thing that you do. But it's important to know the other countries because also other countries believe more in the truth. maybe. So, for example, the European countries have, and we don't. I think that was very important, the intervention of Stefano. We don't can make the measure of the truth in relation with the COVID. There are other factors, climate change, there are other factors, but not only. This could be one. We need to put more and more universal problem because in the country, I think also the people to promote the post-truth are different interests. And maybe the COVID is again to these people, maybe.
Stephen?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, the one thing I want to draw attention to, again, I've done it before, is the proverbial gorilla or elephant in the room, which is the social media platform. And the last thing you said about depolarizing the algorithms, one of the things we know through a report in the Wall Street Journal is that Facebook is very aware of the fact that their algorithms are polarizing people. And they know how to fix it. And they've decided not to do that because it would interfere with their business model, with their profits. And to me, therefore, that is a key problem we've got to resolve, because I don't think any democratic government 30 years ago would have ever consented to having a few people in Silicon Valley determine the information diet of hundreds of millions of people around the world. No one in their right mind would have said that's okay had it been planned. And I think we've just coincidentally slid into this world where literally half a dozen people in Silicon Valley are determining, through their algorithms what people see. So I think the fundamental issue we're facing is to restore democratic accountability to our own data. It's our own personal data that are being used against us. And I think, to me, that is the most fundamental thing to strive for, to restore our autonomy and privacy.
Vittorio.
Yes.
You're muted, Vittoria.
Well, thank you very much. I've learned so much this morning. I want to make some more general comments. Habermas was praised because of his deliberative model, and of course, deliberation is very important. But deliberation can only function if there is an agreement on some substantial principles. You cannot deliberate on procedural grounds alone, because procedural principles are very important, but if there are no some material substance on which you agree, it's very, very difficult to come to any form of consensus. And I do think that one of the big limits of the Habermasian theory was always that he focused on the procedural at the expense of material principles of consensus. The second aspect, which I think is obviously very true, that it's a very alarming situation that very few people control, as was said, the informational diet of persons. But the reasons why it is difficult to react against that is, of course, the general problem of modern capitalism. Modern capitalism clearly leads to enormous power differentials in a society, but it can do so because it appeals, for example, to the desire of consumers. It offers more consumer goods than alternative systems. And what we see in the modern social media, I think, is to a large amount driven by the fact that we can satisfy vanity. Facebook is the great a tool of vanity. And past. It was already, of course, said, people go there because they want not to gain money, but honor. Christoph Türke, a German philosopher and a social theorist, recently published in German book, I'm afraid it's not yet translated into English, with the title Digitale Gefolgschaft, digital followerships. And his central idea is that a lot of what we are seeing now is a refeudalization of a modern state, because the crucial thing is that we do not share a common truth, but everyone tries to build up his followers. This means a group that believes in him and follows him. It satisfies a personal need. Of course, you don't go to war anymore. These are not a condottieri, but still you get a satisfaction of this need to be ahead of other people. Of course, while doing so, you betray all data about yourself, which is sucked out by enterprises like Cambridge Analytica, which then allow you to manipulate in a much more subtle way and to achieve the ends much better. But I think we have to look at the vanity factor behind the whole thing. And we not only need material principles in a philosophy of law, but we need also a robust account of virtues. And I do think that without analyzing this subjective element, we will not get out of the situation which we are in, which is very troubling.
Thank you, Vittorio.
Stephen, I'm curious to your point about restoring autonomy and privacy over our own data. What sorts of levers are there, in Europe or around other parts of the world for restoring that autonomy and privacy, and which then may help to depolarize or ease some of the assaults on truth that we've talked about?
Yeah, okay. Well, thanks. Yeah, as it happens, well, I just spent 2 months in Brussels earlier this year working with the European Commission on precisely that issue. What can we do? Now, there's a number of European initiatives in the works. The Digital Services Act is one of them. Legislation about political advertising is another one that is in the works. And one of the fundamental aspects of all of these initiatives is to have some sort of public accountability over the social media platforms, which means access to the data, the ability to audit the algorithms. That's one of the biggest problems we're having right now, is that all the social media algorithms are completely unaccountable and unaccounted for. And you have to, and whenever you try to audit them, then Facebook shuts you down, as recently happened to researchers, I think at NYU, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, so the European Commission is pretty, I think, pretty hard-nosed about that. They know what they're up against. I suspect that's going to be the battle of the political battle of the century, because I also know, having worked with Google at the same time as I worked with the European Commission, that there's nothing worse for Google or YouTube executives than the thought that scientists, independent scientists, might have access to the data on their platforms, because that's what I've been told. That to them, that is the horror scenario, because they would lose control of their business model if that happens, and they would feel, they're not willing to consent to that. And opposing that now is the realization within the European Commission that that is actually an essential thing to happen. So how this battle will turn out, no one knows. I think it's going to be incredibly tough. I think, that's the battle lines have been drawn, and that's what's going to keep us occupied for the next few years. And I think, to my mind, that battle is more important than the issue of fake news and, accuracy and all that type of thing, because it's far more fundamental. Who controls access to information? Is it private corporations to maximize their profit irrespective of societal consequences, or is it a democratic governance? And so that'll be very interesting to witness, I think.
So I want Senior, and then Stefano, and then Ricardo.
Oh,
Thank you.
I think that what was very important, this information that you give. And
That was good.
especially the idea that the free scientists not can speak, or they try to not speak. So in some sense, this is the idea that have the Pope when he say there are a mainstream. We all need to be colonized by this mainstream. And this mainstream give the lines that we need to follow. In some sense, in a sort of dictatorship. But what is the end, the cause? They find money. The last thing is to obtain money, the great multinationals or the people to have the power, the important powers. So in some sense, you agree with this?
Yeah, well, can I just make a comment? Can I just make one comment on that? That's important to know in this context. First of all, I agree that the commercial interests are huge and are running the space at the moment, and that's a real problem. Now, if there's good news, then one of the pieces of good news is that the public is not polarized on their opinions towards what is acceptable for data use and customization. We did a survey recently, we just published a paper this year where we looked at Germany, the UK, and the US. And we asked people how acceptable it is for things to be customized by social media platforms. And everybody in all countries, regardless of politics, thinks it's okay to have personalized recommendations for my next movie, my next restaurant, my next romantic partner. This surprised us a little, but apparently everybody's okay with that now. But not politics. No one wants to have their personal data and their personalities and their sexual preferences used to be targeted by politicians. It is not polarized along partisan lines in the United States, which is like amazing. So at the moment, I think that's a real opportunity. Now, I think you're going to have to act really quickly because somebody will polarize this. I can guarantee you. I mean, the moment the Republicans realize that actually everybody agrees on this, they will make sure that there's polarization. I think that's my cynical view. But at least at the moment, the public is totally in support of governing that space, and they're against manipulation, furtive manipulation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to follow up at the argument developed by Vittorio, by my good friend Vittorio. Bye-bye, Vittorio. The point is the following. Propaganda was born in the 17th century. Before it did not exist for political reasons, following a suggestion by Machiavelli and above all by Guicciardini, who was in a sense more relevant than Machiavelli. Because Machiavelli said, if the prince wants to maintain the power, he has to use, he has to use propaganda. Then we moved ahead, first industrial revolution at the end of the 18th century. And there was a major change. Propaganda became misinformation. And it was applied to the economics, not to the political realm. The idea was that industry, the new industrial system, they had to misinform people in order to continue to accumulate capital. There are plenty of books describing that. And if we move one step further, and we come to present days, misinformation is transforming itself into post-truth or fake truth. Why? Because as the French sociologist, famous, Lipovetsky, in a recent book, he should have come here because his real recent book is very relevant, describes, he says, today, the economic system, market system, where does it extracts its value? No longer from the industrial sector, but from the new technologies, which means from consumers. Because you see, the big five in California, where do they get their profits? By selling to billions of people equipments of different types. So you need to use the post-truth argument in order to modify the way of thinking of people. So that explains why we have been talking about post-truth only in the last 15, 20 years and not before. Even though the phenomena, as I mentioned, propaganda was born in the 17th century, is much more. So that is important because what Vittorio said about the consumption side, we should be taken into more consideration. Until recently, we were talking on the production side, but today is the consumers, because the major factories, the major corporations, how do they get their profit? From the consumers. You need to convince people, modifying their, and that has a major impact on education. We sometimes forget to mention that. That is right, because that is the way to use. And in this sense, post-truth is not completely a lie. There are some elements of truth in in a fake truth argument. The point is that you have to mix up with the emotions, as Anna Marta said this morning, and other. And that is a new phenomenon, which, in my opinion, deserves great attention. That is why, for instance, Pope Francis keeps on talking against extra consumerism, super consumerism, because consumerism existed even before. But today, he said recently, we are facing super consumerism. Perhaps he was thinking in terms of this type of argument. Thank you.
But